Will come to order. Today we're considering the nominations of Val Demings, William Zollars, and Gordon Hartogensis to be the governors of the United States Postal Service, and James Lake and Nicholas Miranda to be associate judges on the D.C. Circuit, D.C. Superior Court, D.C. Superior Court. Welcome to each of the nominees and to your friends and family members who are joining us here today. And certainly congratulations on your nominations, and thank you for your willingness to serve in what are all very, very important roles. The United States Postal Service is an essential public service that connects communities all across our nation, and the Postal Service Board of Governors plays a critical role in providing oversight and guidance to the Postal Service, ensuring that it effectively serves all Americans. For years, the Postal Service has faced significant financial and operational challenges. The historic bipartisan Postal Service Reform Act passed in 2022 and has been an important step put forward, putting the Postal Service on a sustainable path. However, more work needs to be done. The Board of Governors will be integral as the Postal Service continues to consider operational changes which could have significant impacts on service and on Postal Service cost. The Board must ensure that the Postal Service remains, first and foremost, a public service that provides timely and reliable mail delivery to every household in the nation. The Board of Governors must provide sound strategic insight and oversight of management to ensure the Postal Service continues to fulfill its public service mandate. The Board is a bipartisan body whose members bring diverse experience and management expertise, but who must all share a strong commitment to oversight and accountability. The Postal Service Board of Governors also works closely with Congress to provide transparency and ensure the Postal Service delivers for the American people each and every day. Congresswoman Demings, Mr. Zollars, and Mr. Hartogensis, I look forward to hearing from you here today. The D.C. Superior Court functions as the state-level trial court here in the nation's capital. The court handles some of the highest case volumes in the country and has been strained further by extended vacancies on the bench. Every day, judges of the Superior Court decide matters that impact the freedom, the livelihoods, and the safety of individuals and families all across the District of Columbia. Currently, 9 of the 62 seats on the court are vacant, delaying cases and placing serious burdens on current judges. This committee has advanced 12 Superior Court nominees this Congress, but most, unfortunately, are still waiting to be confirmed by the full Senate. And I'm pleased that we have 2 very well qualified nominees to the Superior Court here today, Mr. Lake and Mr. Miranda. Thank you both for your service to the people of the District of Columbia, as well as your willingness to continue to serve in this role. And I look forward to hearing from both of you here today. Now it's the practice of the committee to swear in witnesses, so if each of you would please stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony you will give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. You may be seated. Our first nominee is Val Demings. Congresswoman Demings is a lifelong public servant. She began her career as a social worker and then went on to serve at every level in the Orlando Police Department before becoming Orlando's first female chief of police. And in this role, she oversaw a 40% decrease in violent crime over 4 years, demonstrating her ability to deliver critical results for the people of Florida. In 2016, Congresswoman Demings was elected to represent Florida's 10th District, and during her 3 terms in the House of Representatives, she served on the committees on Homeland Security, good committee, Judiciary, Intelligence, and Oversight and Government Reform. She worked across the aisle to reduce household costs, grow the economy, and conduct critical oversight of the federal government. Congresswoman Demings, it's great to have you here. You may proceed with your opening comments.
Chairman Peters, Ranking Member Paul in his absence, and distinguished members of the committee, good morning, and thank you for your consideration of my nomination to serve on the Board of Governors of the United States Postal Service. I also want to thank President Biden for this nomination, and if confirmed, I look forward to the opportunity to continue serving the American people in this important role. I am grateful for the support of my husband of 36 years, Jerry Demings, who currently serves as the mayor of Orange County, Florida. Unfortunately, he could not join us today, but Jerry and I both served in law enforcement and have had the honor of leading the two largest law enforcement agencies in Central Florida, in the Central Florida region. I truly feel blessed to have a spouse who has dedicated his life to serving others. We have two sons who are certified firefighters and a third son who works in the private sector. I was raised in a rural part of Jacksonville, Florida. I grew up on a dirt road in a house that people used to say was way back in the woods. My paternal grandmother lived next door to us in a house my father built for her by hand. My grandmother was born in 1903. She could neither read nor write, but she had a major lifeline that connected her to her sisters in Darlington, South Carolina, the United States Postal Service. She relied on the mailman, as she affectionately called him, for her Social Security check, news from back home, and other goods that she needed to live on. My grandmother would wait anxiously for the mail to be delivered. And regardless of who she was or the challenges of where she lived, the mailman never failed to deliver. When the demands of the route permitted, he would take the time to check on my grandmother and have meaningful conversations with her, letting her know that she mattered to him. Those memories are precious. I decided a long time ago to dedicate my life to public service. I worked for the state of Florida with foster care children, joined the Orlando Police Department, and worked my way up through the ranks to become the 36th chief of police. I was appointed chief during the recession of 2008, and crime was at an all-time high. As a leader, it was important that we never lost sight of our mission to keep Orlando a safe city by reducing crime and maintaining livable neighborhoods. The only way we could meet the mission was through extensive community engagement with stakeholders, including the public, city officials, business owners, the faith community, and others. In 2007, I was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives. Two of my classmates served on this committee. During my time in the House, I served on the committees of Oversight and Government Accountability, Homeland Security, Judiciary, and Intelligence. I chaired the subcommittee on Emergency Preparedness, Response, and Recovery. It was an honor to serve my nation in such a special way and work with the colleagues on both sides of the aisle to improve the lives of the people we served. I learned a lot during my time with the state as a police chief and as a member of Congress, and I am committed to bringing my diversity of experience and diversity of ideas to the Board of Governors. The Postal Service helps bind our nation together even today. The American people depend on the United States Postal Service, just as my grandmother did. Every day, the American Postal customers are waiting for prescription drugs, payments, special greetings, and packages. And importantly, the USPS always delivers. Its mission is like none other. It is one of the oldest and most trusted institutions in our nation, delivering dependable and affordable service to every part of our country. I know from my time in Congress that the Postal Service has ongoing challenges and is in the midst of a 10-year reorganization plan. If confirmed, I will commit to working with all members of the board to ensure that we are listening to the concerns of all postal stakeholders and that our voices are reflected in our choices. Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you again for this opportunity and the other distinguished members of the committee to appear before you today. I look forward to your questions.
Well, thank you. Our second nominee is William Zollars. Mr. Zollars recently completed his first term as a governor on the U.S. Postal Service Board of Governors. Prior to this role, he began his career at Eastman Kodak, where he worked on finance, strategic planning, logistics, and general management. He went on to become the CEO of the Yellow Corporation, an American transportation holding company headquartered in Kansas, leading the company for 12 years. Mr. Zollars has served on the boards of many public companies, including Cigna and Prologis, and thus has experience relevant to this position. Mr. Zollars, welcome to the committee. You may proceed with your opening remarks.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Peters, Ranking Member Paul, in your absence, and the other committee members. I am Bill Zollars, and I'd like to thank the President for the honor of being renominated, and thank the Senate for your consideration of my reappointment to the Board of Governors of the U.S. Postal Service. After completing my first 3-year term on the Board of Governors at the end of 2023, there are 2 reasons why I'm seeking a second term. First, the Postal Service is vitally important to the country, and there's more work to do. And secondly, I think I can continue to help based on my background in governance and logistics experience. The founders obviously thought the Postal Service was important enough to include in the Constitution. And the fact that it has remained an integral component of American life throughout the history is confirmation of their foresight. As a resident of Kansas, I can verify the added importance of this vital service to rural America, where the Postal Service is a reliable, dependable, and trusted symbol of government promises kept. It is for these important reasons that I am committed to help solidify the long-term future of this important part of America. During my years in private industry, I've led large organizations in 3 Fortune 500 companies and served on the board of directors of 4 separate Fortune 500 companies in the healthcare, technology, real estate, and transportation sectors. Sometimes we lose track of the scale of the Postal Service, but interestingly, if the Postal Service were a public company, it would rank 45th on the Fortune 500 list, alongside companies like Pepsi and FedEx, with revenue of nearly $100 billion. It's a big organization. My last corporate leadership position, as Chairman Peters mentioned, which I held from 1999 to 2011, was as the CEO and was relevant to the Postal Service since it was a nationwide unionized logistics network of over 50,000 associates. There we were able to deliver 4 consecutive years of record revenue and profitability, and in the process, we provided outstanding service to our hundreds of thousands of customers, whether they were in Manhattan, Kansas, or the island of Manhattan. In addition, we served every zip code in the country. It's our own version of the universal service obligation. We delivered shipments to our customers on time, regardless of distance or density, and in the most efficient way possible. We were also able to offset a labor cost disadvantage with a knowledgeable and experienced workforce enabled by an optimized network and effective technology, things that are an integral part of the Delivering for America plan. Similarly, we were able to effectively deal with millions of dollars of unfunded liability in some of the multi-employer health and pension funds. I've also had the opportunity to experience Postal Service outside the U.S. 5 years in Europe, 3 in Canada, and a year in Japan gave me a very different view of approaches to mail and package delivery. Finally, and very importantly, even though the Postal Service has complex and significant challenges ahead, like modernizing the logistics network, they also have a substantial competitive advantage: last mile, last density, touch. No other competitor has that, and that is why UPS, FedEx, and Amazon use the Postal Service on a frequent basis to complete their deliveries. If I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed, I will work with Congress, the Postal Regulatory Commission, and the Board of Governors to oversee and guide management toward obtaining a sustainable future for this required and fundamentally important American asset, the United Postal Service. In my role, I will also continue to provide maximum possible transparency and responsiveness to all our constituents. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Our third nominee is Gordon Hartogensis. Mr. Hartogensis recently completed a 5-year term as the Director of the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation, where he worked to implement the special financial assistance program that has delivered pension benefits to hundreds of thousands of workers, retirees, and beneficiaries. Previously, he founded two companies, Petrosoft Corporation, a supply chain and logistics company, and Oric, a customer relationship management software company. His experience in public service and as an entrepreneur qualify him to be a governor of the Postal Service. Mr. Hartogensis, welcome to the committee, and you may proceed with your opening remarks.
Thank you, Chairman Peters, Ranking Member Paul in absentia, and distinguished members of the committee. It's an honor to appear before you today as you consider my nomination to be a governor of the United States Postal Service. I want to thank the President of the United States for nominating me to this important position. I'm here today with my wife, Grace, and I want to also thank her for her support. My journey to public service began when I was a teenager. I grew up in Rockville, Maryland, and attended Montgomery County Public Schools from K through 12. I remember how proud I was watching my father serve on the Rockville City Council, addressing the city's problems and making it a better place to live. After a career in business, which included working on Wall Street, co-founding two technology startups that were successfully acquired, and working as an angel investor, I came to Washington to give back and serve my country. During the last 5 years, I served as director of the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation, or PBGC. When I started the position in 2019, the PBGC had insufficient funds to address a widespread crisis across many insured multi-employer plans, which threatened drastic cuts to the pensions of workers in the transportation, mining, manufacturing, and construction industries by 2025. This crisis threatened not only these workers, but also the employers who participated in multi-employer plans. The desire to find a solution was bipartisan, as could be seen in the Joint Select Committee on Multi-Employer Pension Solvency in 2018. I worked with Congress to design a rescue and oversaw its implementation by the PBGC until my departure last spring. If confirmed as a governor of the United States Postal Service, I would be honored to dedicate myself to work to make the Postal Service fulfill its mission of universal service while operating in a financially sustainable manner. The USPS has some major challenges ahead, including the implementation of its 10-year Delivering for America plan. As a governor, my role would be to work with the board to review the strategy of the USPS to ensure it makes sense, provide oversight, and hold management accountable to the milestones and goals of the organization. Additionally, I believe there is a role for the board to ensure there is transparency for outside stakeholders, including Congress, regulators, and the public. The Postal Service is a part of government that touches every American and is an essential part of the infrastructure underlying the American economy and society at large. I believe that my background in both the private and public sectors makes me an ideal candidate for this role. My private sector background in business and technology will allow me to review the operational plans of the organization and allow me to provide useful feedback to management. My time at PBGC will allow me to contribute to the discussion on compensation for employees, benefit structures, and pension funding challenges. My experience in government has taught me to tackle big problems objectively and to view potential solutions through the lens of political reality. The U.S. Postal Service is an essential service that touches everyone. Any disruption in service is going to be met with fierce backlash from stakeholders. It's important to communicate effectively the benefits of any changes that impact the end customer's experience. At the same time, the Postal Service is a wonderful part of our lives. It brings us holiday cards, birthday presents, and love letters. Post offices bring together rural communities and give an identity to many small towns. While kids today still call it snail mail, the well-timed handwritten letter has never quite gone out of style when one wishes to make an impression. The USPS is an institution that's worth protecting, and if confirmed, I would be extremely proud to have the opportunity to help it to evolve and thrive. In conclusion, if I'm confirmed, I would be honored to serve on the Board of Governors of the United States Postal Service. My mother, who's 87, still uses the mail for all of her correspondence and bill payments. I met my wife, Grace, in 1989 and still have letters that she wrote to me during our first year together. The Postal Service is important to all of us, and I would love the opportunity to put my skills and experience to work in service of this critical and beloved institution. Thank you for allowing me to appear today. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you. Our next nominee is James Lake. Mr. Lake currently serves as the Chief of the Workers' Rights and Anti-Fraud Section of the Office of the Attorney General for the District of Columbia. He first joined the office as a trial attorney in the Office of Consumer Protection. Previously, Mr. Lake worked as an associate at Bredoff and Kaiser, PLLC, where he represented local and national labor unions and multi-employer pension plans in litigation in both state and federal court. Mr. Lake, welcome to the committee. You may proceed with your opening remarks.
I appreciate it. Chairman Peters, Ranking Member Paul, and members of the committee, I am humbled and honored to appear before you today as you consider my nomination to join the Superior Court bench. I want to thank your staff for their courtesy and professionalism during this process. I also wish to thank the District of Columbia Judicial Nomination Commission, and especially its chair, the Honorable Marie Johns, for recommending me to the White House. And I thank President Biden for nominating me. I want to express special gratitude to my family, the love of my life. My wife, Elizabeth Wilkins, is an extraordinary partner in all things, and not a day goes by that I don't think about how lucky I am to be on this journey with her. My two children are my joy and my inspiration, and yes, they have been bribed with sweets to be on their best behavior today. We'll see how that works out. To my sisters, Cynthia, Ellen, and Betsy, I am who I am because of the strong women in my life, and I am extraordinarily grateful to be your kid brother. Finally, I owe an enormous debt to my parents, Prudence and David, who moved to Washington, D.C. in 1970. My father to become a tax lawyer and my mother eventually to work for a neighborhood church. They raised my sisters and me with unconditional love, a strong commitment to family, and a whole lot of joy, an approach Elizabeth and I try to emulate every day as parents. I currently serve as the Chief of the Workers' Rights and Anti-Fraud Section at the Office of the Attorney General for the District of Columbia. I have had the privilege of leading that section since its creation in 2021, working alongside an extraordinary group of lawyers and staff to build a high-volume affirmative litigation practice, helping thousands of district workers secure essential rights in the workplace. Both in this role and before that as a trial attorney in the office doing consumer protection work, I have litigated regularly in Superior Court and value the institution and its importance to the city. If confirmed, I will do my level best to emulate the example set by the fair-minded jurists currently on the court and to ensure that the institution performs at the level of excellence that the public rightly expects of it. Throughout this nomination process, I found myself thinking about the great fortune I had at the start of my legal career in serving as a law clerk for several brilliant, hardworking, and even-handed jurists. I am extraordinarily grateful to count two of them as mentors to this day, Judge Harry T. Edwards of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit, and Judge Michael P. Shea of the U.S. District Court for the District of Connecticut. If confirmed, I will draw not only on the lessons I learned as their law clerk, but also from as much advice as they'll be willing to give me. I will not have the same opportunity with Judge Mark R. Kravitz of the U.S. District Court for the District of Connecticut, for whom I clerked for 4 months before he died at the hands of Lou Gehrig's disease. Judge Kravitz was kind and fair-minded, equal parts compassionate and brilliant, and as chair of the U.S. Judicial Conference Advisory Committee on the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, a civil procedure nerd at heart. It was awful to watch a terrible disease run its course, and I look back on that time with great sadness. But I also look back with a measure of gratitude. I'm thankful to have learned what I did while I could from Judge Kravitz, and his memory will serve as an important lodestar if, with your advice and consent, I am fortunate enough to chart my own course as a judge. As a native Washingtonian, it has been an honor working alongside the dedicated public servants at the Office of the Attorney General for the District of Columbia on behalf of the people of the city. If confirmed, I look forward to serving the district and its residents in a new role as an associate judge of the Superior Court of the District of Columbia. Thank you again for the opportunity to appear before you today. I look forward to your questions.
Well, thank you. And our fifth and final nominee is Nicholas Miranda. Mr. Miranda currently serves as the Chief of the Victim Wellness Assistance Unit at the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia, where he leads a team of 30 professionals. Prior to this role, he worked in the office's Cyber Crimes, Federal Child Exploitation, and Human Trafficking Unit. Mr. Miranda has served on detail as an associate counsel at the Office of White House Counsel as well. He has also worked as an associate at Morrison & Forrester, LLP. Mr. Miranda, it's good to have you here today. You may proceed with your opening remarks.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Peters, Ranking Member Paul, and the members of the committee. I'm honored and humbled to appear before you today. I thank you and your staff for holding this hearing, and I thank you for your consideration of my nomination to be an associate judge of the Superior Court of the District of Columbia. I also wish to thank the District of Columbia Judicial Nomination Commission and its chair, the Honorable Marie Johns, for recommending me to this position, to the White House, and President Joseph Biden for nominating me. I would like to express my gratitude to my current and former colleagues at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and especially to the U.S. Attorney and Principal United States Deputy U.S. Attorney for their leadership and encouragement. I owe an immense debt to all of my friends and family for their support and guidance, and I especially want to acknowledge those members of my family that are here with me today. My daughter Eleanor, my wife Carolyn, my mother-in-law Na, my stepfather Vic, and my mother Susan. Words simply cannot express how grateful I am for all they have sacrificed and given to me. Without them, I would not be here, and I am so incredibly proud to call them my family. I have dedicated my legal career to serving the public, inspired by the path blazed by my mother, who had me while she was putting herself through night law school. Since 2012, I have been an assistant United States attorney at the U.S. Attorney's Office in the District of Columbia. In this role, I have prosecuted hundreds and hundreds of violent crimes in our community, with a focus on sexual assault and child sexual abuse. And I have tried dozens of cases in D.C. Superior Court. Since May of 2021, I have also served as chief of the office's Victim Witness Assistance Unit. In this role, I lead a team dedicated to helping victims and witnesses of crime in the district by providing them with trauma-informed care, safety planning, emergency housing, necessary service referrals, and help navigating the complex judicial process across multiple divisions of the D.C. Superior Court. Throughout my career, I have seen firsthand the important work that the D.C. Superior Court does, how it touches the life of every single one of us in this community, and how important it is for it to have a full court so that it can fulfill its mission. I believe that my experience would allow me to immediately make a difference, and it would be a privilege of a lifetime to have the opportunity to continue to serve the district in a new role as an associate judge on the court. Thank you again for the opportunity to appear before you today. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. There are three questions that the committee asks of every nominee, and I'm going to ask each of you to respond briefly with just a yes or no, so that's very brief. We'll start with Congresswoman Demings, and then we'll work down the dais. First, is there anything you are aware of in your background that might present a conflict of interest with the duties of the office to which you have been nominated?
No.
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 Second, do you know of anything, personal or otherwise, that would in any way prevent you from fully and honorably discharging the responsibilities of the office to which you have been nominated?
No.
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 And lastly, do you agree without reservation to comply with any request or summons to appear and testify before any duly constituted committee of Congress if confirmed?
Yes.
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 Great, thank you. So my first questions are going to be to the three Board of Governors here. The Postal Service, as you're all aware, has launched plans to make significant nationwide changes to its operational network, including facility consolidations and changes to service standards. The service impacts and the cost of these changes certainly must be considered, I believe, very carefully. And the Postal Service should not make any changes if it will significantly harm service, which should always be first and foremost in everyone's mind. To examine these changes, the Postal Service has requested an advisory opinion from its regulator, the Postal Regulatory Commission. The PRC will further study the impacts and will issue its findings and recommendations shortly, expecting them in July to be released. So my questions to the three governors, I'll start with you, Congressman Demings, and the other three, and then I'll mix it up with some other questions, but we'll have you do the first one. If confirmed, would you commit to carefully reviewing the PRC's opinion, including its findings on service and cost impacts? And you can do yes or no on this, and I'm going to have a follow-up.
Chairman Peters, thank you so much for that question, and it is a resounding yes.
Great, thank you. Mr. Zollars?
Yes.
Yes as well.
So now let's dig a little deeper. So we'll start again with Congressman Demings, and then I'll move it to the next questions. Congressman, would you encourage Postal Service management to carefully consider the PRC recommendations and discuss adjusting its plans if you see concerns? Will you certainly weigh in aggressively to make sure that they're at least addressing those concerns, and how would you do that?
I think the three nominees have pretty clearly expressed the importance of the United States Postal Service to the American people. I told a story about my grandmother to try to paint a picture that it matters to a person who cannot read or write, but lives in a very extremely rural area. And so, yes, when we are considering major decisions, certainly as the Board of Governors, we need all of the information possible to make sure that we're making the right decisions, decisions that do not negatively impact the mission of the U.S. Postal Service. And I believe that the Postal Commission, the Postal Regulatory Commission, plays a critical role in making sure that we have the information that we need.
Thank you. Mr. Zollars?
Yes, based on what I saw in my 3 years, my previous term, every one of the recommendations from the PRC is really seriously considered. I see no reason that that will change, as well as seriously considering recommendations that we get from our other constituencies.
Thank you. Mr. Hartogensis?
I think it's very important for the U.S. Postal Service to be responsive to its stakeholders and oversight, that whether it come from the PRC or from Congress, and to take very seriously and weigh recommendations and look into what can be done on them.
Thank you. Very good. So I'm going to start with you, Mr. Zollars, and then we'll go down and back to finish with Congressman Demings. The governors of the Postal Service, as you well know, are the organization's key decision makers. This is a big job, a lot of responsibility, as you know. The governors decide the Postal Service's overall strategic direction, provide oversight, and make key decisions on finances, investments, operating plans, prices, and so much more. Now, I've heard about your willingness to make sure you're looking at PRC and looking at those recommendations, but I think the committee would like to hear that if confirmed, how are you going to approach the responsibility of taking an active, vigorous role in leading the Postal Service? Sometimes we see perhaps a backseat to Postal Service management, and we would expect the Board of Governors to be actively engaged and use the expertise that each and every one of you have. But please reassure the committee that if confirmed, you will not be in the back seat. You're going to be in the front seat, and you're going to be doing things to drive that process, and give us some examples of how you've done that and why we should feel comfortable that that's indeed going to occur. Mr. Zollars, we'll start with you, and Mr. Hartogensis.
Sure, Mr. Chairman. I think maybe it would be helpful to just redefine kind of the role of the Board of Governors versus the role of the PMG and the management team. And the way I think about this, and the easiest way to explain the difference in that role, is that the Board of Governors is responsible for determining the what along with the PMG. The how is really the responsibility of the operating management of the organization. So we provide a lot of input to the management team. I was honored to serve as the chair of the Operations Committee. So that's the place where we dig into a lot of these issues that could impact service, with our dual objective in mind of making sure that we provide world-class service and also do it in a sustainable way from a cash flow perspective. So I would assume that that will continue if I'm lucky enough to be reappointed, but you can be sure that the governance responsibility of the board is really at the forefront of all of our discussions with management, and where we see a need for course correction, we do that. We have that discussion with management in a very active way. Just maybe one other point of reference here, and that is that the Board of Governors is really a bipartisan group. It's very difficult. I think people would be hard-pressed to determine which side of the aisle any of the governors was on based on the conversations that take place in the boardroom. This is a very active group of people. They all take their responsibility very seriously and act in accordance with the oath that we've taken to make sure the American people get the best possible product from the Postal Service.
Great. Mr. Hartogensis?
Thank you. If confirmed, I plan to, I guess, dig in two areas. One, leveraging my background in logistics. I ran a software company that did supply chain management software, resupplying gas stations and convenience stores. So hoping to use that background to look at the operational plans of the USPS and just to see if they make sense and evaluate those, and in some cases try to add value and make the plans better. The second is my background in the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation. Take a look at the compensation structure, how the organization is managing its pension, if there are shortfalls, what's being done, and hoping to improve the overall funding status of the organization based on that experience. Thank you.
Congresswoman Demings.
Chairman Peters, I believe if we remember why we are here in the first place, this is about providing the best service possible to the American people. It's not about what Republicans think or Democrats think or independents think. It is about providing the best service, making sure that the oldest, most reliable institution that is trusted by the American people remains solvent. As a police chief, I had an opportunity to, I was appointed chief when crime was at an all-time high. And I remember working with management within the organization, other stakeholders, the mayor, the city commission, the faith-based community, the business community, everybody who the police department interacted with or touched to make sure that we were making the best decisions on behalf of our community. If confirmed, I will fight hard for the American people to make sure, regardless of who you are or where you live, how much money you may have in the bank, just like my grandmother who lived way back up in the woods, but the United States Postal Service met her where she was. I will bring that same spirit and attitude and fight on behalf of the American people.
Great. Thank you for each of your answers. We are multitasking here, as we do every day, so they have called votes. So I'm going to recognize Senator Hassan to speak, and she will also take the gavel while I go vote, and I will return. Senator Hassan, you're recognized for your comments.
Well, thank you very much, Chair Peters, and I thank you and the ranking member for holding this hearing. Thank you to all the nominees for being here today and for your willingness to serve in these really important roles. Congresswoman, it's good to see you again, and I want to start with a question to you. Trust in the Postal Service is obviously key to its success, so any changes in Postal Service operations that jeopardize the security or reliability of mail and package delivery need to be carefully scrutinized. While Granite Staters and Americans across the country depend on the Postal Service to deliver mail, packages, medicine, and important documents, especially in rural areas, fewer and fewer people and small businesses are choosing to use the Postal Service, fearing that their mail may be stolen or lost or delayed. And it's not just postal customers who are concerned about mail security and customer service. I recently spoke to members of the Rural Letter Carriers Association in New Hampshire who fear for their own safety while delivering mail. One of them was recently held up at gunpoint, and the arrow key he had was stolen. These carriers are urging the Postal Service to put in place simple, common-sense fixes to prevent mail theft and ensure that the mail is delivered on time. How will you work to prioritize investments in mail security and customer service to rebuild trust in the Postal Service?
Senator Hassan, thank you so much for that question, and certainly having served as a 27-year law enforcement officer, I do believe that public safety is the foundation on which we operate. How can we deliver the mail or packages or medicine or, supply or meet the needs of small businesses and others if our postal workers are not safe?
Yeah.
And so we have to, as a member of the Board of Governors, if confirmed, I will continue to work with the postal inspector as well as make recommendations as needed regarding prosecution with the AG's offices to make sure that we are, number one, having a proactive approach to securing the mail and protecting our workers, but also making sure that if you violate the law, that you will be held accountable for doing so.
Well, I appreciate that, and I would say that the carriers themselves have some very straightforward recommendations that I hope people will reach out to them and really do some listening, because they also could use some safe vehicles. And I'll just add that in rural parts of our state, this is a real concern as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Hartogensis, in August, Postmaster General DeJoy announced plans that will result in slower mail delivery in many communities. The impact of this proposal is really clear. Rural communities will wait longer for mail to be delivered. This is unacceptable, and it comes at the same time as the Postal Service's plans to move mail processing out of Manchester, New Hampshire, which is also expected to cause additional delays for people in my state. Even though the efforts to move mail processing out of Manchester are currently paused, the Postal Service has said that it will continue moving forward with these plans next year. If confirmed, what steps will you take to stop the implementation of proposals that will slow down mail delivery, especially for rural communities?
Thank you for the question. I'm sorry to hear about that in New Hampshire, Senator Hassan. I think a critical role of the Board of Governors is really to take a look at the plans and hold the management of the USPS, including the Postmaster General, accountable. So if there are things that are causing delays, that are mishaps, the important thing for us to look at is this a mistake that's correctable, that, a glitch that we can learn from and make things better, or is it part of a recurring pattern that's not, which requires a course correction? And I think it's critical for the Board of Governors to determine which is which, and if it requires a course correction, take action.
Well, I appreciate that. I would let you know that in conversations, sometimes with management and sometimes with the Regulatory Commission, my impression has been that there is not the kind of consultation with employees, just probing their expertise, getting their feedback about things, talking to people in the states who know the states. For instance, the New Hampshire move from Manchester is supposed to go to Boston, and they say it's just 50 miles. It's one of the most congested places in America, so it's a 2-hour drive that you have to plan for, right? And that just changes the dynamic of the timing from the processing center to an entire state. And you'll hear that from other colleagues of mine as well. And yet when we raise these issues and say, why don't you talk to the employees, what we get is, well, once the employees accept the changes, things will go fine. And these are not, these are experienced carriers, professionals, processors who deserve not only respect, but their expertise needs to be respected as well. So I hope you all will take that under advisement and really do some outreach here. Mr. Zollars, I had a question for you as well. The Board of Governors plays a key role in conducting oversight of the Postal Service. That's what we're talking about. And I really appreciated your comment that the performance of the Postal Service really represents promises kept. New Hampshire is also the home of the longest continuously used postal office in the country. Hinsdale, New Hampshire, of about 4,000 people, has had that post office in operation since 1816. And we're very proud of it, and day in and day out, since then, the Postal Service has really worked very hard to keep its promises. So I appreciated that comment. The board should ensure that proposed operational changes undergo a robust cost-benefit analysis that includes consideration of the Postal Service's fundamental service obligations. We've talked a little bit about the Regulatory Commission's advisory report, what you all will do with that, but how will you independently weigh Postmaster DeJoy's proposals to cut costs against the service obligations of the Postal Service?
Yeah, well, thank you, Senator, for the question. It's a balancing act, as you know, between the two kind of joint objectives we have as an organization.
Yeah.
We have to deliver world-class service and at the same time find a way to get financially stable over time. This past year, since I've been gone, there've probably been a lot of changes, but I can tell you when I was on the board and heading the operations committee, we were in constant contact with other board members about how operations were going, and where they looked like they were not tracking against the plan. We made suggestions to management about changes that should be made, and many times those were adopted. I think that is an absolute must for the governance of this organization. But I think the other thing to keep in mind is we have a network that was designed before the advent of email. So it's 40 years old, probably, at this point. We're trying to become contemporary so we can compete with UPS and FedEx and deliver that 95% on-time performance, which we should be delivering. But we've got a lot of catch-up to do. So there are going to be changes to the network that are inevitable to get to a contemporary network. We aren't planning on closing anything, as far as I know, but there will be operational changes because we've got locations that are in the wrong place with the wrong equipment and the wrong training. The good news is that the 640,000 employees of the Postal Service are embracing that change. We've spent a lot of time, and I personally have been on town hall meetings with the Postmaster General where we do talk to employees and we do get their input, and it's extremely valuable. So we're getting input from employees, we're getting input from the PRC, the OIG, Congress, and we're taking all that into consideration. But at the end of the day, it's really our responsibility to monitor the performance of the PMG and make sure that we're tracking against the plan. Anytime we're not shy about going to the PMG and talking about changes that need to be made, and I think that will continue to happen.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'm way over time, and I'm about to turn the mic over to Senator Rosen, but just one or two thoughts. The network may be outdated, but there's also new. My constituents depend on the Postal Service for some things now that they didn't 40 years ago, like the delivery of their medications, right? So I just want to be really clear about how we go about thinking about what the ultimate goal is and what the responsibility to customers are. And I appreciate your interest in that, and I will just ask all three of you to keep that in mind as well. And to Mr. Lake and Mr. Miranda, I'm sorry we didn't get to you, but thank you for your willingness to serve, and I look forward to supporting you. With that, I will turn it over to Senator Rosen.
Thank you, Senator Hassan, and appreciate that, and appreciate your comments. And of course, Ranking Member and Chairman are not here, but I appreciate them holding this hearing, and of course, to all the nominees for your willingness to serve. I'd like to especially welcome my friend, Congresswoman Val Demings, who I had the privilege of serving with in the House of Representatives, and I want to thank you for your lifetime of service and your willingness to continue that service, Congresswoman. So my first question is to you. As you may know, for nearly a year, the Postal Service attempted to relocate certain mail-out processing from Reno, Nevada to Sacramento, California. This very, very misguided decision would have had a detrimental impact on Nevadans, including seniors, veterans, small business owners, and rural communities who depend on the post office for on-time, reliable service. It's why I led the charge against this misguided plan, including in this committee. I also introduced and co-led with Chairman Peters bipartisan legislation to stop the implementation of this proposal, and I'm pleased to share that following these efforts, the Postal Service announced that local letter mail processing will remain in Reno. However, more work has to be done to mitigate the negative impacts of the Postal Service's proposed nationwide network changes that are set to take effect next year. I might add, why is it so misguided? Because they wanted to move our I know you're from Florida, and so we have a Lake Tahoe is between Reno and Sacramento, and there's a very famous pass called the Donner Pass. There's only one way to get from Reno to Sacramento, and it's closed an average of 30 days a year due to wildfires and weather, and it is very treacherous, and so it is very misguided to move our mail there to send most of it back to Nevada. Anyway, Congresswoman Demings, if confirmed, how will you ensure that the Postal Service provides reliable service to all Americans, no matter where they live? You spoke about your grandmother. And how would you combat the proposed Postal Service initiatives that would undermine performances in places like Reno?
Senator Rosen, thank you so much for that question, and thank you so much for your kind words earlier. You know, as a police chief who was appointed when crime was at an all-time high, the people in the community expected us to make decisions that would help reduce the crime rate and keep them safe, but also not negatively impact their quality of life. We had our thoughts and ideas about what we believed would work, but we also included stakeholders in the community. We asked their thoughts. We would present what we felt was a good idea, but then ask their thoughts since they were the recipients of the service that we were going to provide. You know, I'm someone who believes that data matters, research matters. We know that we want to make sure that the post office is reliable and affordable, sustainable, but we have to make sure that we're in the public service business. And I'm quite familiar with the scenario that you talked about. And so to take the mail and transport it 131 miles away from someone who's right there may not have been the most thought out plan. As a governor, I will certainly, if confirmed, I will certainly work with management and my fellow board of governors to make sure that we have all of the information, that we've done our research. We've talked to people who will be directly negatively impacted. And as Senator Hassan said earlier, people who are actually doing the job and maybe a little bit more familiar with some of the challenges, we will make sure we have the information to make sure that the mission of the post office is not adversely affected.
Thank you. Mr. Zollars, my question is next for you, because the Postal Service recently requested an advisory opinion from the Postal Regulatory Commission on specific aspects of its Delivering for America plan. While it's encouraging to see the Postal Service engage with the Commission, I'm deeply concerned that any recommendations offered by the Commission will ultimately not be followed by the Postal Service. According to federal law, the Commission's final opinion is advisory in nature, does not give the Commission the authority to alter or prohibit service changes. And so, Mr. Zollars, I'd like to direct this question to you. Do you agree that the Commission's advisory opinions should be non-binding?
I think all of the advisories from the PRC are taken extremely seriously. We will certainly look at this one. I was not on the board when this issue surfaced, but certainly I will commit to giving it serious consideration when it comes back, as I'm sure the rest of the board members will.
Would you consider, if you're confirmed or reconfirmed to the board, you would support changes to federal law that would give the Commission the authority to prohibit or alter service changes?
I'm not familiar enough with that issue to respond to that in a thoughtful way.
Congresswoman Demings, would you like to respond to that?
Well, we know that Congress plays a major role in deciding policy that affects the post office. And having served in the U.S. House of Representatives, we want to make sure that we are meeting our constitutional obligation and responsibility to pass legislation or support legislation or review proposed legislation that will help us accomplish the mission, the core mission of the United States Postal Service.
Thank you. Mr. Hartogensis, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, I would say we would certainly be open to discussing any potential legislation with Congress that would help us get better feedback and working with you. As far as, you know, the merits of any particular legislation, I, you know, can't comment since I don't know enough about it.
Well, would you agree that the United States Congress has oversight over the Postal Service?
Absolutely.
Mr. Zollars?
Yes, absolutely.
Ms. Demings?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I am the chair now. I'm looking at my time. Wait a minute, everybody went to vote. I'm like, wait a minute, my time is up. I'm going to go over to look at Senator Peters, and he's voting. So I am the chair, and so I will pass, yield the rest of my time and pass to Senator Butler.
Thank you, Senator Rosen. Thank you all for being willing to serve and your families for supporting you in public service. I actually am going to go in a little bit of an order that I had not anticipated because I appreciate the importance of justice in the District of Columbia and the frankly incredible backlog that is facing so many district residents in accessing that justice. And so just really quickly to Mr. Lake and Mr. Miranda, to the point of, I think, what is sort of most important for the District of Columbia, and that is the caseload. Just quickly, I wanted to just ask, you all are familiar with the numbers. The Superior Court of the District of Columbia serves almost 700,000 people. In the latest data that we have been, that has been made available, new case filings are increasing by 41%, nearly 45,000 filings. And the chairman noted the vacancies on the court, and we're quickly trying to address those as a part of this committee. What do you feel like are the biggest challenges that you would face transitioning to the Superior Court, and what's your plan to make that transition a smooth one for the purposes of getting to swifter justice for the residents of the District of Columbia? And I'm happy to start with you, Mr. Miranda.
Thank you. First, let me begin with the second part of your question. And the answer to that is that I know DC Superior Court. I have practiced in DC Superior Court for more than a decade. I have been lead counsel in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of criminal cases. I've tried dozens of cases in DC Superior Court as an AUSA. And further, as chief of the Victim Witness Assistance Unit, I have worked with multiple divisions of DC Superior Court, from family court and domestic violence court to probate, to the Crime Victims Compensation Program. So the biggest thing that I can offer in transition is, to use a cliched phrase a little bit, I can hit the ground running because I have that directly applicable experience and I have deep knowledge of the inner workings. Because when it comes down to it, I absolutely agree with you that one of the biggest issues facing the citizens of the District of Columbia, and a continued reason for the relatively high crime rate, is part of this backlog and not getting judges on who can expeditiously review and resolve cases.
Thank you, Mr. Miranda. Mr. Lake.
Senator, thank you for highlighting the backlog. I do think it's trite but true that justice delayed can be justice denied, and so I think it's important to think through the ways in which, as a judge, if confirmed, I can help alleviate and move cases quickly, fairly, and efficiently. I think to the other part of your question, I do think my experience has been managing a high volume investigation and litigation practice. And so I like Mr. Miranda, expect to be able to hit the ground running in terms of moving through a high volume docket fairly and efficiently.
Thank you both. To our Board of Governors nominees, you're welcome. I wanted to give you a little bit of a break. I noticed everybody drinking a little water, taking 3 minutes from me to you. But in all seriousness, I think the energy that has been directed towards your nominations is deserving on behalf of the American people and the important roles to which you all are being nominated. I am, come from one of the largest states in our country, in California. It is not just Hollywood and the San Francisco Bay Bridge. It is 58 counties, rural and urban, diverse in its geography, and difficult in terms of managing the goals and objectives relative to the United States Postal Service. I have spent my time on this committee really trying to be a voice for the parts of California that don't get a lot of attention, our rural communities. And I want to start with you, Mr. Zollars. You made a few points that I thought were worth understanding a little bit more, particularly noting your service on the Operations Committee. I have talked in this committee about a few post offices in California that frankly have been closed for more than a year. And I would wonder how those kinds, and I've written to the Postmaster General, have talked to him, I think he was sitting in that very seat in which you are sitting, talked to him about the challenges of California relative to climate and wildfires, storms, all the things that have led to these post office closings, but with no real demonstrable effort to get to a place where these communities could be consistently served and meeting the operational obligations of the post office. So if you were confirmed, can you talk a bit about what actions you would take as a member of the board and also its subcommittees? I appreciate you raising those. Its subcommittees to take a look at those post offices that have been closed for extended periods of time around the country, particularly our rural communities, to ensure them that they are not going to be like Nyland, California, in its third consecutive year without a permanent post office. And I want to pose that question to the three of you.
Well, thanks for the question. Being a resident of flyover country, I understand the rural issue pretty well because I'm in the middle of some rural communities. I can tell you it is top of mind with the Board of Governors, something we talk about at almost every meeting, something that we're striving to make sure meets the standard of making sure every American gets reliable, dependable service.
And Mr. Zollars, I'm not the interrupting type, but as my daughter would say, I'm going to be the interrupting chicken right now and just say 3 years of a permanent closure that was told to be temporary has 3 years now become somewhat permanent for these residents. And so striving is nice, but not meeting the needs of this particular community, and I'm sure it is not the only one. And so I appreciate the niceties, I genuinely do, but I just want to know, just straightforward, like, how do you see your role as the Board of Governors? What actionable things will you imagine? Given your previous service, you know what is within your purview as a member of the Board of Governors.
Right.
How would you show up on behalf of these folks who've now been without a post office for 3 years? And I got another one that's been closed for a year. And we can go down the list, but they deserve to know what you would do, what it means for you to even be there in terms of their service. And I know, Mr. Chair, I'm over time, but I really want to nail this question.
Sure. No, I think that's a very good question. I don't know specifics of the areas you're talking about. Happy to follow up with you because I'm not aware of the specifics and I have been gone for years, so I don't know if things are underway. But I can tell you that it's something we try and deal effectively with. We try and work with management on. And, you know, the fact that the rural part of the network is the most challenging part, particularly when you have natural disasters like fires and floods and other things that get in the way of good service. I can tell you personally, I'm committed to making sure that we do the best possible job with rural Americans and make sure that they have the same reliable, dependable service as the rest of the country.
Thank you, sir. I'm beyond time. I really appreciate everyone's willingness to serve, and if there's another opportunity, we'll follow up with questions.
Okay, Senator Hall, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations to all the nominees. Thank you for being here. Mr. Zollars, let me just start with you since you're from my neck of the woods, so to speak. Exactly. Although I think you're a Kansas resident, isn't that right? Yeah. Kansas side of Kansas State.
I'm on the wrong side of the line.
Well, yeah, we'll try not to. I'll try to overlook that.
But I've been on the other side of the line.
Well, good. Well, I hope. I hope.
I've lived on the Missouri side.
Oh, good.
So.
Well, good. I'm warming right up to you. This is getting better and better. Let me just ask you, speaking about the significance, just picking up where Senator Butler left off, actually, about the significance of delivery for rural communities, which characterizes so much of my state, so much of Kansas, and where I grew up. I grew up in a town of 4,000 people. Yesterday, the Missouri Farm Bureau, which is my state's largest general farm organization, wrote to the Postmaster General regarding the latest plans that the Postal Service has that they're calling the Regional Transportation Optimization Plan. And as the Farm Bureau, Missouri Farm Bureau points out, what this plan amounts to is to eliminate end-of-day collection at post offices that are more than 50 miles from one of the nation's 60 regional processing and distribution centers, and to take other actions that would reduce the mail flow to rural America. I think we have a poster. Let's just look here. So that means everywhere in blue would lose mail pickup and some delivery and experienced reduced mail volume to residents. That's a lot of the country. That's most of my state. That's most of your state, Mr. Zollars. The Farm Bureau has very significant concerns about this, and frankly, so do I. I've asked the Postmaster General about this myself and raised concerns just a month ago, but I want to point out something in the Farm Bureau letter that's particularly interesting. According to the USPS's own analysis, nearly 70% of first-class mail volume in rural areas would experience significant downgrades under this plan. 70%, that's a big number. So, first, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, without objection, I'd like to enter this letter into the record.
Without objection.
Thank you. Mr. Zollars, can I just ask you, are you familiar with this Regional Transportation Optimization Plan?
I've been out of the service of the Board of Governors for a year, so I don't know what's happening today. I wasn't aware of the specifics of that letter or what's going on with the current rural approach to mail delivery, but I'm generally aware of the plan, yes.
Do you support its implementation?
I support the implementation of the DFA when I was there. As I said, I don't know what adjustments have been made in the last year.
Well, I'm sorry, the DFA.
Delivering for America plan, which is the 10-year plan.
And of which this is a subset.
This is a subset of that, correct.
So would you support this, what I have on this board behind?
I don't really have enough detail to let you know one way or the other.
Well, let me ask you this. Would you commit to, if you are reappointed, would you commit to using your position here, your very significant position of influence and oversight, to reconsider this proposal and make sure that rural Americans in my state, your state, every state, are getting full and regular delivery of the mail?
As a member of the flyover country community, absolutely.
Let me just ask the other nominees this. Mr. Hartogensis, are you familiar with this plan, the Regional Optimization Plan?
Not in detail enough to, as this map is.
Do you support its implementation?
Well, I from what I understand of the plan, there are good reasons for the plan in terms of the long-term modernization of the Postal Service. I do think it's important to take into account these types of concerns. There are 350 million constituents for the post office, and if rural communities are really being impacted negatively, I think the USPS needs to learn from that and account for that as part of its mission, and make sure that service is not sacrificed.
So that sounds like a little bit of a yes and a little bit of a no. On the Regional Transportation Optimization Plan itself. Mm-hmm. Do you support its implementation based on what you know?
Based on what I know, I support the plan in terms of modernization of the USPS. I'm not in the know enough to understand the exact impacts on rural communities, but I think that as a member of the Board of Governors, if confirmed, I think that we would need to look at that.
Okay. It sounds like what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to follow up in writing with both of you. Maybe I'll give you an opportunity to look at the details, and because I'm really concerned about this. I'm really concerned about this. And let's be honest with you, if we can't get some fidelity on this, and if I can't get your commitment that we're going to make sure that people in blue here don't lose 70% of their mail volume or have 70% of that volume downgraded, I'm going to have a really hard time advancing your nominations. Congresswoman, can I just ask you, are you familiar with this plan? Do you support it?
Senator Hawley, I am not familiar with that plan, but if confirmed, I certainly want to gather all of the information and all of the data that would justify implementation of this plan, because it appears to me, just based on what you have shared with us, that is in conflict with the universal service obligation.
Indeed.
And I do see Florida on your map as well, right? Some significant areas in Florida, which the overwhelming majority of the state really is rural. And so I will definitely do my research to make sure that what we are supporting continues to meet the mission of the post office. And I think you've heard my concern for rural areas in our country.
Good. I appreciate that. I will follow up with all three of you. I'll let you all look at this plan and do some homework on it, and then we'll follow up in writing for the record. In my remaining time here, I know Senator Ossoff wants to ask questions. And I think maybe, Mr. Chairman, we could do a second round after. I want to let Senator Ossoff go, but just.
Well, if Senator Ossoff, a couple extra minutes, if you could do that, that would be fine.
Oh.
We won't have time for another round, so.
Okay, that's fine. Okay.
I'll have a soft gavel with Senator Ossoff's acquiescence.
Okay. Let me ask the three of you about, just following up again on something Senator Butler talked about. That is the delay in rebuilding post offices. In Bering, Missouri, this is Knox County. A little over a year ago, we had an EF2 tornado that knocked out the post office, the Bering post office. We're over a year on from that now, still not reopened. Now, the postmaster has sat right where you're sitting. I asked him about this. He pledged to me that he would get it rebuilt, reopened. I just want to know, from your perspectives, are you willing to commit to me today that if confirmed, you will work to get rural post offices, all post offices, but it's particularly acute in our rural areas that have been put out of service. Will you commit to me to working to get those reopened on a timely basis? You think about this community. This is a small community. They have been without mail, essentially. They got to go drive somewhere far. They've been without mail for over a year. A year. I mean, that's, frankly, I think it's ridiculous. It's so bad that I've introduced legislation that would create a statutory requirement to rebuild these post offices in a timely fashion. So let me just ask you, and after that I have one more question. Let me just ask you if you're willing to commit to working on this and to making sure we get these post offices reopened when they are damaged. We'll start with you, Congresswoman, go down the line.
In Florida, we also have some extreme weather issues to deal with. So yes, if confirmed, I would commit to getting these post offices reopened as soon as possible.
I'd commit to that as well.
I would commit to that as well.
Okay, thank you. Last thing, Mr. Chairman. Congresswoman, let me just ask you about a little bit of your rhetoric that, I'll be honest with you, I find a little bit worrisome, and give you a chance to address it, because this is a nonpartisan position for which you are being nominated, and I realize you've been in partisan politics, and that's fine. I'm in partisan politics, but that's not this position. So let me just ask you about a thing or two that you've said that I find a little worrisome. Let's start with the democracy one. We heard a lot of talk in this most recent election now concluded about Republicans, and particularly the now president-elect, being a fascist, which I think is incredibly irresponsible rhetoric. You said things like that, I think, Congresswoman. Kamala Harris believes in democracy. Donald Trump does not. What's left to say? That's just from a little over a month ago, 2 months ago, September 10th. Do you want to address that? Just give me your perspective. Give us your perspective for the record about how you see this role, about this rhetoric. Let me just give you a chance to respond. And there's one more I want to ask you about after this.
And I thank you for that, Senator Hawley. You know, having served as a law enforcement officer, as a police chief, certainly as a member of Congress, I've certainly had opinions about the behavior of individuals on both sides of the aisle. But what I can assure you is that whether as a law enforcement officer or as a member of Congress or as a member of the Board of Governors, that my political opinions will never negatively impact the work that is before us on this very bipartisan board. Matter of fact, I currently travel all over the country, asked to do so, along with former Republican members, to talk about the importance of working together in a bipartisan way. I believe it is the only way that we can get the big things done. And strengthening the post office is a big thing that we need to get done.
Last question for you on the same topic. Let's look at the other one. This is about the current president-elect's ability, constitutional right to serve. You said after the Civil War, we ratified the 14th Amendment. It says people try to override the government should be banned. Donald Trump tried to overthrow the government. This was in reference to the cases that tried to get the former president, now future president, kicked off the ballot. I'm deeply concerned about those cases. They failed, as you know. The U.S. Supreme Court weighed in on this 9-0, said absolutely not. This is up to the people to decide. My question for you is that since this time, since you said that, he's been reelected. He's going to be the next president. If you're confirmed for this, you're going to serve under him effectively. Are you able to do that? And just comment on this, which you said, and your potential future role.
Senator Hawley, when President Trump was first elected in 2016, he was not my candidate. But I went to his inauguration because the American people had spoken. And I wanted to, in a very unified way, be there to support the President of the United States because the people had spoken. I believed it was a free and fair election, and it was important for the country to move forward. I was in the House chambers on January 6th. As you well remember, it was a tough time for our nation, I think, for the members of Congress and the American people. Expressing my opinion coming out of that very tough time, we moved forward. The same person has been reelected. The American people have spoken, and I respect the will of the people. Again, I can assure you that any personal opinions or things that were said during a specific time in our history will not negatively impact my commitment to working with the Board of Governors to protect and strengthen the United States Postal Service so those people who live in rural areas that we both care about can receive the service that they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Ossoff, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Congresswoman, Mr. Zollars, Mr. Hartogensis, congratulations on your nominations. I want to discuss accountability. Just if I could, by a show of hands, how many of you have had to fire somebody? All three. Are you prepared, if there is cause, as members of this board, to terminate any Postmaster General if necessary? Ms. Demings.
Senator, thank you for that. And yes, I've been in the position of having to hire and terminate. And termination is based on performance. And when you're not meeting the core mission of the institution, you don't deserve to remain in your job. If you are working along with the other stakeholders to meet the core mission of the organization, you deserve to keep your job. And as the governor, I will be clear about both.
Yeah, in my case, Senator, I also have a lot of experience, unfortunately, in letting people go. I think to be clear about what we do at the Board of Governors, we do set annual goals for the Postmaster General, and we track those goals on a quarterly basis and give him feedback along the way on how he's doing against those goals. When I left a year ago, there was tremendous support for the DFA and for the Postmaster General. So I'm not sure that anything has changed. But if it was obvious that the Postmaster General needed to be replaced, that's one of our primary responsibilities, is to hire and fire the Postmaster General, and we take that very seriously.
The short answer is yes. I think there are a few criterion where the Board of Governors should act with the Postmaster General. One is lack of performance based on the milestones. Another one is failure to learn from mistakes. And mistakes will happen if it seems like the same things are being repeated without learning. And the last one is lack of transparency to us, to Congress, if we feel like the management is hiding things, sweeping things under the rug, that's cause for termination.
Thank you all. Let's talk about USPS performance in my state. As of late spring, on-time delivery of first-class mail in North Georgia was at 36%. And as you all know, that means seniors aren't receiving their prescriptions. It means small businesses aren't receiving supplies and can't get products to market. It means that vital court correspondence, notices to appear, notices of eviction are not being received by citizens. Postmaster General came here to this room and acknowledged that USPS was failing my constituents in Georgia. Mr. Zollars, you were on the board at the time that some of these changes were being planned. Why did USPS, why has USPS, as the PMG acknowledged, failed my constituents?
Yeah, I was not there, but I think the primary impact was the Atlanta consolidation, and I was not on the board when that was executed. I can tell you that we made some changes. We had a bit of a problem in Richmond, backed off that one when I was on the board through conversations with the Postmaster General. I can't speak specifically to what happened in the Atlanta consolidation. I'm aware that there were issues. That's obviously not where we want to be in terms of performance. We should be at 95% on time for all of our products. And so that's something that we would strive to try and get to in Georgia. I have family in Georgia.
Yeah, but you are intimately aware of and were on the board when this Delivering for America plan, which included the consolidation to regional distribution centers, was being planned.
That's correct.
So
I don't think the problem was with the...
Why has the implementation of that plan, based upon your extensive and deep knowledge of that plan and your role in developing it, why did it lead to what is undeniably abysmal failure to serve my constituents in Georgia?
We had obviously execution problems. I'm not sure that the plan was necessarily the bigger part of the issue. I think more of it was execution. I don't really know the details about what went wrong with the execution, so I can't really speak thoughtfully to that.
Serious execution problems. I sat in a room full of USPS executives at that Palmetto facility, and I asked a very simple question. Who was in charge of executing this? There was silence. No one was in charge of executing this. As you all know from your management experience, when no one is in charge and no one has primary responsibility for executing a challenging and complex task, it is unlikely to be done successfully. How is it possible, Mr. Zollars, that this organization failed to make one person responsible for the execution of something so complex?
I really can't account for that.
Will you look into it deeply? Should you be confirmed and report back to me?
I certainly can, yes.
Will all three of you commit that, should I call you or request a meeting for information about the performance of USPS in Georgia, that you will return my call within a day and meet with you within a week?
Yes, absolutely.
Sure.
The Postmaster General does not personally read the mail that I send him, will you?
Yes, I will.
Of course.
Let's talk about data. There's been some apparent improvement since the Postmaster General came under harsh and bipartisan pressure in Congress to improve USPS performance in Georgia. But I have some questions about the integrity of data that USPS reports to the public and to Congress. Will you provide me, my office, and this committee with any and all relevant information that will reveal how these numbers are crunched and what they mean?
Sure.
Yes.
I have no further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you, and thank you to our nominees for joining us here today and for your willingness to serve in these important positions. The nominees have filed responses to biographical as well as financial questionnaires, and without objection, this information will be made part of the hearing record, with the exception of the financial data, which is on file and available for public inspection in the committee offices. The hearing record will remain open until 12 p.m. tomorrow, November 15th, for the submission of statements and questions for the record. This hearing is now adjourned.